Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the CKC channel. I'm your host, Video Master Calvin Klaassen. And welcome to another Lyndon lecture. And of course, our host as well, of course, Lyndon himself. Welcome, Dr. Bouah.
Yes, good evening, Calvin, and good evening, viewers. It's great being here just after Christmas, and I'm glad that we're still able to continue with our show, Calvin.
It's fantastic. Yeah, I'm even streaming all the way here from Johannesburg. It's quite hot on this side, but the streaming has to continue. And of course, if we can get in some instructive lessons, then why not? So last time, I think it's about a couple of days ago, we had our first London lecture, and we had quite an interesting topic, King March, the King March, and we saw some very cool hard work by the kings. This time around for this evening, we have another very popular subject in chess, which is sacrifices. And of course, we're going to see some exchange sacrifices as well. So yeah, Lyndon, can you maybe tell us a bit more, or just tell us a bit more what we're going to see this evening?
Yes, Calvin, thank you very much. And viewers, tonight the theme is sacrifices, and some of them are exchange sacrifices, others are sacrifice for a piece, for 3 pawns. I've always been fascinated, Calvin, by sacrifices. You know, one of the first books that I studied was Mikhail Tal. And it was a book written in the descriptive notation, and it was printed probably by HRM Press. And I studied this book around about 1987. And Calvin, what fascinated me was the fact that Tal was able to sacrifice. And just when you see he's got a piece hanging, he puts a second piece hanging. And then the description at the bottom by the annotator would be, the opponent can only take 1 piece at a time. You know, those type of things, the creative juices got me flowing. And I think all of us are always in a difficulty when you play for, do you play for results? Do you play for creativity? Do you take the chance to play rook takes knight, rook takes bishop? Do you go for those things in a real competitive game? And those are the questions that faces me quite a few times, Calvin. I don't know how you feel about sacrifices.
Yes, well put, Lyndon. And I think chess imitates life to a large extent, and they say that fortune favors the brave. So at some point when you're playing chess, you have to throw in or some material. And good evening, Bearded Zaid. Welcome to the show. And Zaid also is asking, was it that Tal versus Botvinnik book, Lyndon? Was that also, or maybe in your repertoire there that you looked at, or maybe Bearded Zaid likes that one. But in any event, I think the quote that you mentioned is quite cool. Yes, Tal, of course, comes to mind immediately when you think about sacrifices. And it's very interesting. Earlier today, I was watching a bit of this online tournament that Magnus Carlsen and them are playing in. I'm not sure what the name is now. But David Howell was talking about another exciting youngster, Dubov. And Dubov has been playing some very, very interesting sacrifices. And I think he quoted Dubov by saying, well, and it was also a position where there were like 2 pieces hanging, and he pushed another pawn as well. And he said, well, the nice thing about sacrificing your pieces is you don't have to worry about blundering them later on. So that's another thing. Yeah. So it's excitement waiting for us this evening. Good evening, Dolph as well. Welcome to everybody. If you are new to the channel, if you are popping in for the first time, don't forget to press the follow button. If you are wondering why you cannot chat in the chat box, feel free to send us some questions, give us your comments. But if you can't chat, then just make sure to press the follow button. It's the purple heart just below the channel. If you can't press it yet, just sign up. There should be a sign up button at the top as well, or on the home page of Twitch. Sign up is for free. It's quick and easy. And you come back and press the follow button and then join us in our discussion of sacrifices. So, welcome to everybody. And we have a starting position here, Lyndon. Is it from one of your games?
Yes, Calvin, tonight I decided to just focus on 3 of my games. I have a belief that when we do some of these lessons and exercises, I'll be using most of the games played by South Africans and African chess players. I believe that we need to get examples from our local players. And as we go along, we'll have more and more examples from different players in South Africa, and of course in Africa as well, because I have a great admiration for our players when they participate at the Olympiad or in the African Championships or in the zonals as well.
Yes.
So I try to gain as much lessons and tactics from there. But for tonight, Calvin, since it's a holiday season a bit, I'm using my own games. And Calvin, the first position that is on the board that we have is in fact a position that I was black against a gentleman by the name of Umar Kakumba from Uganda. And this game was played in Kenya in 1995. It was the Cal IBM Easter tournament, and I went to go play in that particular tournament. I had a lovely tournament. I scored 8 out of 10 points. I came third, and the next year, Watu Kobese won the tournament.
Very interesting stuff.
So that's a backdrop. I'm playing black in this position, Calvin. So maybe you want to give us an assessment of what you think, what your thoughts are of the position.
All right, let's have a look. So let's count the material. So black has 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. White has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. Knight versus bishop, 2 rooks and a queen. So materials equal for now. The white king seems slightly exposed. Not really that much. There's no open files that I can see. But the king on e2 looks slightly more open than the king on g8. And then let's see. The rooks, black's rooks and queen are all looking up the A file. The A file, of course, is blocked right now, all because of this bishop. If you look at the pawn structure, all of black's pawns are on the light squares. That means if we remove the queen and the 2 rooks, then we will have a very, very pleasant fight between the knight and the bishop, because the bishop is a technical bad bishop in these endgames. We've spoken about pawn structure before many a times, and yeah, the bishop will have nothing to do but defend its own pawns. So that's something, one positional advantage I can see. When you look at weak pawns, a3 seems to be a target, but all of white's pieces are defending a3. And yeah, it's not so easy to break through if you have the same amount of material as your opponent. So white is doing everything to defend. d4 could potentially be soft, but c3 can be played at some point. So it seems like black has got some advantage. He's got the nice knight on e6, by the way, applying pressure on d4 and sometimes supporting the push on f4 for tactical reasons, perhaps. Of course, the knight can jump around as well. That c4 square also looks juicy at some point for one of black's pieces. So black seems to be better, but it's a question of if black is going to be able to break through. That's the big question. So yeah, I would say black is slightly better, but black needs to do something to prove it.
Yeah, Calvin, thanks for that analysis. And indeed, this is one of those games where black's knight is very, very strong and comfortable. But of course, how do you break through? And you know, this is especially, Calvin, for the younger players and viewers. You've got to give yourself opportunity, and you've got to be able to maneuver around, grind a bit, just play moves before you can actually find the plan. And for me, it took some time before I actually hit upon the plan. So let's play a few moves and let's just see what happens here. The first move that black played now was rook e8.
All right, the rook to e8.
So I've got an idea here. I want to move the knight away from e6, but I also don't want to have the pawn go to e6 for white. And perhaps give a breakthrough in the position if that white knight is not placed, the black knight is not placed close enough. So rook e8, just a little mysterious move there, but we will see later, right? White now played pawn to f4. So white is just consolidating, but all his pawns are coming in. The queen is there, and now I played knight c7.
All right.
So I've got this idea, knight a8, b6, c4. That's my idea.
We're talking about that beautiful c4 square, yes. And on c4, the knight will be hitting the queen and that soft pawn on a3, yes. Okay, makes sense.
Right. So that's the idea. He then played the rook c3.
Pressure on the c6 pawn.
He's attacked by weak pawn. So of course I have to play rook e6 in order to continue my plan. So the rook then takes up the position, defends the c6, and then stops any potential pawn to e6 later on as well.
Yeah.
My opponent then went rook d3, and I then went knight a8. So,
Right.
so I'm maneuvering to get to c4, but of course he now plays rook f3, and I realize if I go immediately to b6, then bishop c5 may be played.
Yes, and then white will of course
And then of course
be able to get rid of that strong knight and get rid of his bad bishop. So that we don't want to allow. Okay. So therefore, queen a6.
Immediately queen a6 must be played, and then he played bishop c5. So once he plays bishop c5, that gives my rook the opportunity to go into c4. So rook goes into c4, and now the queen has a square on a4 to go to as well. So the rook is now well positioned on c4, and of course my opponent now decides, okay, he's not going to play c3 because that a3 pawn may be endangered in some lines. So he goes queen d2.
Okay, queen d2.
And then I went back knight c7.
Knight c7. So okay, so now you realize that the knight can't go to b6 without getting exchanged. Where's the knight going?
That's a big question, Calvin, because remember, we're still maneuvering. I don't want to draw. I'm happy to play on. We're playing in Nairobi. So for me, I can play all night if I need to. So I'm happy to play out the position and allow my opponent also the opportunity to go wrong. But of course, my opponent is a strong player. I played against him in the African Juniors just before then. So I do know him, and he knows me. So king f2.
Yeah, king to f2, and just by the way, it is we mentioned this as well, maneuvering a bit and up and down a bit here and there, because white is not the one that's threatening anything, guys. Black can afford to move around. We're not in any danger. So this is what they call, the GM say you can play these types of positions forever. So you just torture your opponent. So king f2 played. White is basically just waiting.
Right. So I now decided to go rook e8. Because of course now the e6 square again becomes vulnerable, and of course the rook can go to a8 now. The rook has a good square on that, but I have an idea in mind here, Calvin, and we'll see it in a moment. Right. My opponent now played king g2.
G2, yeah.
He's playing some moves to get to safety, and I decided to go queen a4.
Okay, hitting c2.
Hitting c2, and the next move by him is forced.
He played c3, so he can't play anything else. What about rook f2 maybe?
Well, he can play rook f2. He can play rook f2. No reason. Whatever he plays, it doesn't matter, because black has already got an idea in mind.
Okay, all right. So
rook f2 or c3 is quite fine. And same thing. All right. So Calvin, this is an interesting position, and this is the one that was what I was hoping to achieve, and now I have achieved it. And Calvin, one of the great exponents of the exchange sacrifice was Tigran Petrosian.
Yes.
And Petrosian was the 9th world champion. And I studied his games. I had a book called Life and Games of Petrosian. And then I also had the Life and Games of Mikhail Tal, was the book that I was referring to. So it wasn't Tal versus Botvinnik. That one I obtained only recently, the 1960-61 World Championship match. But the Tal one was Life and Games of Mikhail Tal. And in this position, Calvin, I decided to play a rook takes bishop.
So here it comes in, rook takes bishop. And just by the way, welcome to Boom Shaka in the chat box. Boom Shaka says seasons greetings, gents. Welcome, Boom Shaka. And rook takes c5, beautiful move, Lyndon. And by the way, Petrosian, also one of my favorites. I've mentioned it before. He's got one of his latest books, or one of the latest books on him, is one that I saw at Lyndon's house as well. It's called Python Strategy. One of my favorite books, actually. So you guys must check it out. Petrosian at his best. And he's very famous for these exchange sacrifices. And something about exchange sacrifices, Lyndon. What can motivate such an exchange sacrifice? I believe there's a couple of motivations that one should consider. You don't just sacrifice an exchange out of the blue, or if you feel like it. Can you maybe give us a couple of reasons what would actually just spark the idea of giving up? I mean, the rook is worth 5 points. Technically, the bishop is 3. Why would one give up the rook for the bishop in this situation?
So, Calvin, you are correct. There are many factors to consider before just deciding to sacrifice. And in this position, if you look closely, then you would have noticed that white bishop on c5 and all the pawns are on dark squares.
Yeah.
So that bishop is an important part of the defense of most of the pawns, because of course on c5 the pawn on d4 is connected, the pawn on c3 is connected to d4, because the bishop can also jump back to b4, and the bishop is also keeping a3 under its protection. So once you remove that bishop, then that whole pawn phalanx become available for attack.
Yes.
Then at the same time, the knight is very handy, because the knight can jump. Because if you look closely, the knight can jump to e6 and then keep f4 under control, and c5, and then jump into e4. So that knight could possibly get a fantastic position on e4. Now, at the same time, if you look very closely at the position, you will see that, yes, white has 2 rooks, but there are no open files in this position. So in other words, there's no entry point. So the knight can become dominant in this position. And the only open file in the game, the semi-open file, is in fact the A file, which at the moment black has got under control with queen a4 and rook a8 to come as well. So that is why, for me, the position was ripe for an exchange sacrifice, because after that, the white pawns will be weak and the queen side would be open to invasion. So those are my reasons in this position, Calvin.
Okay, fantastic. That explains it very clearly. Thanks, Lyndon, because, inexperienced players might find it very difficult to give up the rook for the bishop if they don't have a good motivation for it. And like you said, the a3 pawn is already key, and the bishop holds it. With the a file, that will be black's. And like you said, all the pawns are basically being held by the bishop. So that's big enough reason already. In this close position, this bishop is actually worth a lot for white. Not for attacking purposes, but just to hold on, to break through. Black needs to get rid of that bishop. And you do sacrifice for tactical reasons, but this is not immediately tactical. Like Lyndon said, he's trying to break through. There's a lot of position. In fact, that was one of my things I wanted to mention. We sacrifice usually an exchange when you're looking forward to enjoying some positional advantages. So that is something that, of course, this knight will enjoy after taking on c5, and on e4 he will be a monster. So all of those things can push you towards sacrificing the exchange. So I think this is quite well timed. Rook takes c5, and white is forced to take, and now the pawns are crippled, and the knight is licking his lips, of course, for this position. And by the way, welcome to Babiki in the chat box as well.
The knight immediately... Great. The knight immediately jumps into e6, because of course from e6 the knight immediately attacks the pawn on c5, and the queen and the knight combine onto the square f4.
Yes.
So in other words, there's still pressure placed laterally, horizontally, and of course on c5 as well. So white in a difficult position now. White has to play. In fact, white now plays queen f2.
Queen f2. Protecting c5,
and queen f2, protecting c5, and we then decided to go queen c4.
Aha, so not grabbing on a3. So just intensifying the pressure on the c5 pawn.
Calvin, in fact, you can't really capture on a3, because once you capture on a3, the pawn goes to c4, and all of a sudden the d file will become open. Even if you capture the pawn on c5, pawn takes d5, and all of a sudden the rook is in the game.
Yes.
Because now queen takes queen, the rook takes. You don't want to exchange. You don't want to open lines for the rooks. You don't want that.
Yes.
So because remember, black is actually not playing for draw. Black is playing to win.
Yeah. He is an exchange. He is up. If the position opens up, his rook might be very useful. So yeah, we need to be tactically alert as well. Queen takes a3 will be a blunder because of those rooks eyeing a3 indirectly. So I like queen c4, and I mean the rook on e8 is probably gonna go to a8 as well. Continue the fight there against
we'll
a3.
go later on as well.
All right.
Yep. So then
Queen c4 was played.
Queen c4.
Welcome to King Ulster, by the way. Good evening.
Queen c4, and white now played King g3.
Just overprotecting f4, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we now in this position, Calvin, black actually played rook a8. Calvin, so rook a8.
It says queen to a4 back.
Sorry, queen a4.
Okay,
right,
okay,
fine.
no, it
Queen
makes
A4.
it makes
I
sense. Rook a8, yeah, no, rook a8 is the move I see now. Okay, I got it. Yeah, queen a4
Yeah,
was a different
A8.
move. All right, rook a8.
Yeah. So now, white now obviously can't defend there anymore.
So just a question, Lyndon.
White decided to.
Just a question.
Yeah.
So rook a8 seems to be a very natural, how shall I say, overall good move and a slightly patient move, because knight takes c5 seems to be very juicy, just jumping into e4 and hitting the king and queen. That seems to be very nice. But sometimes we can be very greedy and forget about all our pieces. I know knight c5 looks very good immediately, but I mean, it's coming anyway, and rook a8 just improving another piece, giving white another problem at a3. Sometimes to give your opponents just more and more problems without cashing in immediately can be so much more torture.
Well, in fact, Calvin, I think this was also a bit of time pressure, because both players were on move 39, and in those days 40 moves was normally our time measure. So I think knight c5 is probably the best move in this position, because of course you have knight e4 check after this. But I think the rook a8 was just to get the rook active as well. But of course, knight takes c5 would have been more appropriate in this position.
Knight c5.
But rook a8 was just to activate the.
Yeah. No, I like rook a8. I really like rook a8. Knight c5 probably stronger, but after rook d4, knight e4 check, white will probably sack the exchange on e4 back. Black will be better, but you're gonna want to get your rook on a8 anyway. So it's two good ways to continue. So rook a8 was played.
Yeah. And then in this position, what was now interesting is, of course, both players have to get to the time. And white now played rook d4.
Interesting stuff. So offering up the rook in a nice way.
Yeah. So Calvin, the question is, should you take the knight there? What do you think, Calvin?
Should you take the rook on d4? So well, my first instinct is if you take it, then white will get his pawn structure back intact, and the rook on f3 is protecting a3 then. So it seems like it's going to be a bit more difficult. Black still looks better, but it seems like we're going to help white a bit to recover his structure. By the way, we've got a long question here in the chat box from Bearded Zaid. King also said c4, a sneaky tactic retort. Yeah, early on we saw that. Let's just see what the Bearded Zaid has to say here. He says, I have a question for after the game. All right. In the initial position, we were shown. Okay, from the initial position, did Lyndon consider f4 for black? If queen f3, white has queen take d4. So okay. So we can let's just read the question quickly, and then we can get back again. Okay, I'll just make a note where this question is. Thanks, Zaid. We're gonna come back to this one, and then we'll check that out. So yeah, my first instinct is not to take the rook. But it can be very easy to just grab, okay, we exchanged, we got our exchange back, and we are a pawn up, I think. So I guess black will still be better, but maybe we can torture him some more.
So, Calvin, I decided in this position to rather play queen takes pawn on c5.
I like it.
Because why recapture there? I mean, he's got to show what he's got. And in this position now, my opponent decided to play rook b4.
Rook b4.
And in this position, I was happy to exchange queens, but on my terms. So in this position, I played rook takes a3.
Yep. Rook takes a3, another one
because
falls.
of course now the rook is coming in.
Yeah.
Another one falls, and if he plays queen takes queen, then the knight comes in with knight e4, going for the check and the pawn on c3.
And c3 will be dropping as well, and you'll have 3 connected passed pawns. Wow.
Exactly. I couldn't see how he could defend the c3 pawn after capturing.
Yeah.
So I was happy if he recaptured. He decided not to recapture, but to play queen e1.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, that's fine. But now the a file is the way into the position. So I decided to play queen a7. It's a nice sort of what I call a retreating move, but also you're going forward, because from a7 you're playing rook a1 to try to get to g1.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, so you're trying to get in on the back rank.
We're going in on the back rank on that side, Calvin. So of course he's got to think very carefully what way. And remember, we're still in time trouble. Eh? I mean, we're not out of time trouble at all. This is 1995. We had increment, Calvin. You know, so unlike you guys that are used to increments, we literally played with a flag hanging. You know, with the old Russian clocks.
Yeah.
In those days. So right. So the next move was rook e3.
Rook e3, okay.
And just blocking there, and then rook a1 attacking the queen.
Okay. Queen has to move to e2, I guess.
So the queen moved to e2 to just keep that under threat, and then a rook g1 check.
Rook g1 check. Okay, so king went to f3, just trying to cover the f4 pawn as long as he can.
And I decided now to invade by playing queen to a1.
Aha. So now we've got full control of the back rank.
Full control of the back rank, and in this position, my opponent decided to open the game by playing pawn to c4.
I mean, at some point, I guess he just decided his rooks want life. So it's a bit of frustration, but what can you do? The board is so closed. You've got 2 rooks and they can't move. So okay, c4.
But that was unfortunately the last move of the game for white.
Okay. That's a very unfortunate one.
So that is now unfortunate, because it would have been a great ending on that side. But I think if you just play the last move, Calvin, knight d4, yeah. So that's where the game ended. Now the knight and queen, king and queen, is being forked there by the knight. But I think the important thing for the viewers tonight is just to have seen the concept. Yes. Of a rook takes bishop, Calvin.
Yes, and isn't that quite poetic over there? Quite just that the knight would have the last say here in the position. The guy that's actually the smaller exchange guy that we actually pushed forward by doing the exchange sacrifice. So yeah, thanks, Lyndon. I think that was a great show of why we would exchange or sacrifice the exchange. We're gonna get back to Bearded Zaid's question just in a moment. But beautiful execution over there. I think it's a nice thing that you were doing, continuously combining the 2 sides of playing tactically, going for the king, and also thinking about in-game, long-term positional type of strategies in mind with your extra pawns, because you sacrificed the exchange, but you got a pawn for it. So there's many things that you got for it. You gave up your rook for the bishop, but you got an extra pawn at least for it. Okay, more pawns came, but initially there was 1 pawn. You got positional compensation for it. You got a beautiful knight on e6. There was pressure on your opponent's pawns. And of course, his king was also a bit open eventually, and you had full control of the a file. So once again, guys, when you sacrifice an exchange, it's not just giving up the rook for the bishop. It's thinking about squares, thinking about open files, thinking about long-term pressure, and of course, still thinking about tactical possibilities. So beautiful combination of strategies there, Lyndon. Let's see here. Yeah, King Ulster says, hi Lyndon, retreating like Queen A7 moves always insightful and appealing. When is a retreating move a backward move? LOL. So, I mean...
Yep, that's the
Yeah, I guess. I mean, Queen
You're
A7 was
going backward to
backwards.
go forward.
Yes.
Yeah, you have Queen A7, but the Queen ended up on A1, so that was the square to infiltrate on that side.
Yes, and then welcome Gerrit Meiboom. Gerrit is asking over here, instead of Queen A7, was D4 perhaps winning? So instead of Queen A7, was D4 winning? What's the idea with D4? So you can't... okay, you can by C takes D still because the Queen is covering the Rook on B4, but what's your idea here, Gerrit? Let's say white plays pawn takes pawn. Are we going to take on F3? Check. Take on F3, check. King takes, and then knight takes, check. Let's say king goes somewhere to G2, G3. What's the idea after that?
Knight C2 is a fork there, Calvin.
Ah, okay. Maybe Gerrit saw a bit further there and thinking that the knight just swoops in. And yeah,
Gerrit, it's a good idea, and I think something worthy to be considered. I think the only problem is that white is not obliged to take on D4.
Take on D4, so maybe is a rook takes D4 possible even to give it up in that way? Or what else? Maybe a rook B1.
But I think in fact, Gerrit, it's really a good position that I should consider D4. But I must say that I wasn't considering D4 because I still wanted to play the closed position with the knight going to C5 and jumping to E4. So it's an interesting one. And maybe, Calvin, when I subject the game to more analysis, perhaps D4 was an important move to open up. But actually, it's interesting that I closed my mind off to opening up the game because I wanted to keep it closed and allow my knight to jump in.
Yeah, I think that's good reasons there, Lyndon. Of course, when you're playing for this closed position, you don't want to open up the position unless you're 100% sure, of course. And Queen A7 just keeps all the benefits, keeps all the torturing going towards white. And you also mentioned that the time pressure was also there. So all of these things, perhaps D4 was a good move. Yes, nice, well spotted there, Gerrit. Both ways look good to me. So let's just go back quickly to the beginning here. I think it's after Rook H3.
Yep.
And let's see what Bearded Zaid was asking. In the initial position, that you consider pawn to F4 perhaps. So what is he saying here? If Queen F3, white has Queen takes D4. Okay, so the problem with that, Zaid, is after Queen F3, it's a cool fork. So Queen takes D4, but you must ask yourself, what are you... okay, actually see... Okay, now maybe that's a good idea. I was going to say you lose a queen, gain a rook.
But I think, Calvin, white can play Queen D2 in the initial position. You don't have to go to F3.
Yeah, okay, no, but I'm just reading what he's saying over here. So that is a cool tactic. And he says, if Queen C2 or Queen B1, don't we want the D4 pawn? Okay, but there's no Queen C2 or Queen B1. I think you maybe mislooked here at the squares, Zaid, because Queen D2, like Lyndon said, covers D4 still. And then that F4 pawn could be a target later on in the game, especially if the knight wants to move around.
It will be vulnerable, yeah. I must say that, I mean, I didn't even consider that Bearded Zaid because I don't want to release the pressure that I have. Normally, I like to keep the pressure, and once that pawn moves forward, he's become too far advanced now.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be able to defend it in an in-game, basically, and the knight can't stay on E6 forever.
Yeah. Okay, Bearded Zaid actually agrees. He says, yes, mislooked. But thanks for the question, Zaid. Always good to check on these things. And Gerrit also agrees later on here with, yes, I like what you did. I'm good with that. Thanks, guys, for the questions and the comments and suggestions. So, yeah, but a nice finish over there with knight to D4, I think. Yeah, nice finish over there. Great game. Okay, so...
Yeah, no, thanks, Calvin.
What are we looking at next?
Calvin, the next game is from the Western Province League. It is a match played in 1996 on the 8th of August, 1996. My opponent's name is Piet Kroon, and he is a 4-time SA Close champion.
Aha, yes.
Just to remind you that the person who's won the most SA Close is Wolfgang Heidenveld. He's won 8. and after that is Charles de Villiers with 6, and then you have Watu with 4, and Piet Kruin with 4 SA closed. So Piet Kruin played for Bellville. He stayed for a long time in Kuils River, and he and I met for the first time. And just the previous week, Kruin drew with Kailakas in the league. And this was a round 2 match in the Western Province League. So let's have a look, Calvin, because the first 8 moves are fairly interesting. So we'll pause on move 7.
Okay,
So,
which year?
Position.
Which year did you say this was, Lyndon?
1996.
1996. Okay.
96.
All right.
96.
So we see a King's Indian main line here. Knight C6. Interesting.
Let's pause there. Yeah. So I was just starting to play the King's Indian, and I wasn't very confident yet of myself, because prior to this I used to play the Grunfeld and the Benko, but I sort of started falling in love with the King's Indian at that stage, and I played Knight C6 because I didn't want to allow him a Petrosian system with 7 D5 after. If I had first played E5, I wanted to get my knight in. So so this was a position that I didn't feel like playing, and I thought, okay, if I play Knight C6, maybe castles first, and then I'll play E5. But of course, Knight C6 is not the best move in this position. Nowadays, I have no hesitation in playing pawn to E5 first, and no problem with that any longer. But I played Knight C6, and Mr. Kruin, with no hesitation, simply played pawn to D5, because now, of course, my knight has to jump, and my knight has to jump now to E5, because I have to offer the exchange. I can't drop back, because then I would just be so many tempi behind. And Mr. Kruin now played knight D4. So Calvin, we were playing this game at Claremont Chess Club, and I was playing in that front row as we were on board 1. And I thought to myself, gee, did I now simply play 8 moves against a former SA closed champion, and already I'm in a worse position, and we're not even playing something that looks like a King's Indian anymore, because all of a sudden my knight is lying on E5, and I'm supposed to have a pawn on E5. Anyway, I'm a young man still at this stage, full of creativity. Yeah. And I thought for about 15 minutes in this position.
And of course, you can see you can see pawn to F4 looming around. I guess that's why white didn't exchange, or what?
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, I'm just going to be kicked now, because of course he played knight D4. He didn't want to exchange, because of course my knight is just going to be driven back.
Yeah.
So I sat there. We started the match at about 7 o'clock or 7:15 around there. That's the time that the league matches started. And I decided, you know what? It's now time for creativity. So I played pawn to E6, Calvin, in this position.
Okay, pawn to E6, and okay, and you want to hit the pawns, but now after white plays this, I want to hit the pawns,
but now there's the pawn F4, and that was what caused me to think for such a long time, for that 15 minutes prior to playing pawn to E6.
Because now the obvious problem about this position for black is if you drop back to the only safe square that the knight has, then you're blocking the C8 bishop from E6, and the white can simply capture on E6 twice. So that seems to be the main problem right now.
Calvin, I can also jump to G4, because he can't take twice on G4, because the bishop can capture on D4. But of course, if I go knight G4, then pawn to H3, simply chases the knight back to H6,
and an ugly square,
and after pawn to G4, I can't stop the loss of a piece, actually.
Maybe a knight E8.
Yeah, G5, the knight has no square.
Oof, and that knight is gone. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
So let's go back to so in this position, Calvin, I decided, you know what, creativity is called for after my big think after pawn to F4, Calvin. Yeah. The pawn is lying on F4.
Yes, the pawn is on F4.
I decided to play pawn takes D5.
Pawn takes D5. So you're offering up your knight.
On move 9, I'm offering up my knight, and I'm saying to him, you may capture the knight if you so wish.
Okay.
Mr. Kruin, 5 minutes thought. 5 minutes thought. He takes a knight because he can't see anything. There's no check in the position, nothing, and I'm happy.
Just a question. So what if white perhaps took back C takes D? Then would you then drop back?
Then the knight just drops. Then the knight drops back to
And
D7.
then you can play a rook E8, a knight C5, and you're all good now. No worries.
Yeah, I'm all good.
So there's no issues with the E6 pawn hanging. Okay.
No issues. So Kelvin, my opponent now played pawn takes knight on E5.
So takes on E5, pawn takes E5, and now the D4 knight's hanging.
E5 now I just want to show the viewers that the two pawns were on E7. They both moved to E6 and D6, and now they've moved to E5 and D5. And I want to call them brothers in arms. So just bear with me with the brothers in arms. And of course, that knight on D4 now has to decide where to go to. Knight to F3, knight C2, knight B5, knight B3. Now, choices have to be made. Where is the best square for the knight? And Mr. Kruan thought for about 10 to 12 minutes in this position and decided to play knight B3.
Knight B3, okay.
So, Calvin, I'll give you a chance to assess it in a moment. Black now, I decided to play pawn to D4 because I believe that I have to play the pawn forward because it is actually a protected pass pawn.
Yes, so you got your protected pass pawn, and of course the knight on C3 is also protecting E4, which is a key pawn.
So now the knight has to move. The knight has to move, and again, the choice is which square to place the knight on. Mr. Kruan decided to play knight D5.
All right.
And I decided to play knight takes E4. So, Kelvin, let us hear from you as a former SA champion, an assessment of this position as well.
Okay, knight takes E4. So obviously white, if you didn't know white is a piece up, then this just looks horrible because black has got these central pawns, even an F pawn that can also go forward at some point in the long run. So central control, very important, and the pieces don't have good squares. So even the knight on D5 can get kicked by C6. And the knight on D5, where is it going? It can't go to E7, F6, F4, E3, C3. So it's going to have to go to B4. So the pieces are getting driven away from the center. And yeah, and if you count the material, black has got 3 pawns for the piece. So it just seems like, okay, first of all, material is equal, I guess, then, because a knight is worth 3 pawns. And black has full control of the center. So C6 coming up, and black has easy development with the bishop on C8 can go to E6 or F5 or wherever. Black has got a nice knight on E4 as well. So yeah, I think white should be very unhappy. I think white is not doing great. He doesn't have good pieces, and plus on top of that, he must still castle. So he still needs time to castle and get his bishop out on C1. So yeah, I think black is doing really good.
So thanks, Kelvin. And of course, the big threat in this position is Queen H4 check. That is a big threat in this position, Queen H4 check. And white has to instantaneously do something about that. And white decided to castle immediately.
Okay, so wants to stop the threat of Queen H4. So yeah, like I said, white needs to take the time to do that. But now let's see, interesting moment. Maybe after talking about all of this, Lyndon, maybe let's give the viewers an opportunity to give some ideas. What would you play in this position? Black to play. Black seems to have many good moves, many tempting moves. Sometimes, it can be problematic if you have so many good moves. But black finds a very, very nice idea here. Can we get some suggestions from the viewers? Let's see. Dr. Queenie said, welcome, Dr. Queenie. She said that this game against Piet Kruan is one of my favorite Lyndon games. King Ulster says, young men, good lesson for us here. And then King Ulster said 2 pass pawns after move 11. Yeah, that's true. And then creativity and depth presented opportunities, yes. So, question to the viewers, what should black play? Black to play. I've mentioned a few candidate moves already, but if you are creative, then yeah, the next move is actually quite nice. Any suggestions from the viewers, guys? Of course, I would say, okay, from myself, my first instinct would be to, okay, there's two moves that pop up in my mind. The first one is I want to get rid of that knight on d5, which leads me to the c6 move. And then secondly, I'm looking at the c8 bishop, and the c8 bishop also wants to develop, so maybe even bishop e6, also trying to kick the knight. So those are my initial ideas. King Ulster says pawn to f5, grab some space. That also looks like the King's Indian Spirit type of move. Does grab a lot of space, makes the knight feel safer on e4. But somehow you'd like to still develop your bishop. So I would develop the bishop before I play f5. That's just my idea. But f5, not a bad idea, King Ulster. Bearded Zaid says a5. So, and Multi Shake also concurs. So the viewers are saying pawn to a5, Lyndon. What do you say about that?
I think that's a great move, and is in fact the move that was chosen, Calvin, by myself, because I analyzed the following. That knight on d5, normally the knight can go to 8 squares if it's planted in the center of the board. But when I look at the 8 squares, c3, e3, f4, f6, e7, c7, b6, is all covered by the black pawns or the black pieces, and the only square that was still available to the knight was in fact b4. So by playing a5, I take away the 8th square from the knight, and then as if you can imagine, Calvin, in the movie OK Corral, then they actually have a horse that can be captured by a rope, and they call it a lasso, and you're just going to do that, and the knight is captured with a pawn on c6. So that's what the pawns have done. Pawn on a5 and the 2 pawns in the center, they've created a noose around the black knight, and black is now, white is in a difficult position how to stop pawn to c6, because out of pawn to c6, black will be 3 pawns up.
Brilliant. I love that idea. So, you know, that's the other beautiful thing about chess. Sometimes you've got the right moves, you got the right ideas, but sometimes, every once in a while, you need to actually invert those move orders and just turn them around. We have this idea of c6, then the knight goes to b4 and we play a5. But what about we switch it around, and a5, like Lennon said, just traps the knight, and c6 is like dark clouds looming over the white pieces, over the white knight on d5. So brilliant idea. Well done for spotting that, guys, as well in the chat box. So a5, what can white do but try to counter white played bishop to d3, hitting the knight on e4. And here comes, I think it was King Ulster's move.
Calvin, immediately the Yep. So pawn to f5 for me was the obvious move, because I've learned very early on that to defend a piece, you must defend the piece with a pawn. Don't defend the piece with another piece, because that piece could be deflected as well. So by playing pawn to f5, if I played bishop f5, pawn to g4 would simply attack the bishop and lose one of my pieces. So that is out. And then if I had played knight to f6 as well, then bishop g5 would be a winning move for white.
All of a sudden, that knight on d5 has found his purpose in that line, yeah. So
you can't have like anything of that. So pawn to f5 must be played in this position, in my opinion. And white now decided to play bishop takes knight on e4. So that's fine. And of course, capture back is played, and then bishop takes f8. So let's just pause after bishop takes f8, because here's an interesting situation now here, Calvin, because white can actually play knight to e3, Calvin. If you just look at this for a moment, knight to e3, because of course the pawn is pinned.
Yeah, the d file is...
But here's something very interesting here.
Okay, so let's see what can be done over here.
But I noticed, but look at the move pawn to a4
Pawn to
for
a4,
black.
and we are just
Pawn to
making the
a4.
knights dance around here, and this knight is now struggling to find a square. c5 is out because of the bishop, a5 is out because of the rook, c1 and a1 is already taken, so knight to d2 seems to be the only move to save that knight, but then of course you can capture the other knight because the d file will be blocked.
In fact, I will just play knight d2. I just want to show the viewers how pretty this looks, because of course, once knight d2 comes, then the pawn captures on e3, and you have got a very interesting position in that all the pieces are on the back rank, but white is completely lost because he's about to go down a piece.
Yeah, and the knight and d2 again can't move. So I mean, you just embarrassed both knights in that situation. Beautiful. It's the most beautiful triple pawn that I've seen. So okay, right, beautiful line over there. Beautiful,
Unbelievable stuff.
beautiful play with the pawns actually. So
Right?
yeah.
So
Okay, let's go back.
let's
So
go back to
after
the initial position. Yeah. So
bishop takes
after bishop
f8.
takes f8, so yeah, bishop takes f8.
Yeah.
White thought for probably about 15 minutes in this position and played bishop to d2.
Okay.
And of course, now is the time, and black now played pawn to c6.
Finally, we gonna collect the knight on d5.
And that's now the big question. Big question to the knight on d5, but in this case, white decided to play bishop takes a5.
Okay, bishop takes a5, so kind of asking us to play rook
Now,
takes.
yeah, Calvin, once you are playing champagne chess, you just got to continue, eh?
Yes.
And I decided to play a rook takes a5.
Okay, rook takes a5.
Because my analysis went like this: if he plays knight a5,
yeah,
then I would play pawn takes knight on d5.
And then the knight on a5
creating
is still
4
hanging.
pawns in the center.
Sure, that's a block of pawns over there. The knight on a5 is still hanging.
And then I have a whole, exactly. So my opponent didn't like this position with the 4 pawns at all, and decided to deflect my queen by checking on f6.
Okay.
I of course have to take.
And then knight takes a5.
Knight takes. And Calvin, a good few years ago, I was studying the match between Karpov and Korchnoi, the 78 match, the first one. And in one of the matches, there were 2 black pawns on the 6th rank, and they said that 2 pawns on the 6th rank, the rook is no match for those ones. And I decided to play pawn to e3 to get my pawns moving as quickly as possible.
On the e3, and of course you've got these beautiful bishops at the back ready to join as well in support. So e3, yeah.
And my opponent now decided to play a quick queen f3 to try to exchange queens. Now I looked at this and asked myself, should I exchange or should I not exchange? But I felt by exchanging, I gain a move to play pawn to d3.
Aha, the move
so
that
I
you want to get.
Queen takes queen. And then I got pawn to d3. So now I'm threatening bishop b4, because then the pawn can go to e2 and e1, and that square is then protected.
Yep, that looks good.
And my opponent noticing this played pawn to a3.
Yes.
And I went bishop c5.
Bishop to c5, maybe looking at e2 check, discovered. And then d2.
Well, in fact, my opponent now played knight b3 in order to defend and attack at the same time. And Calvin, I thought to myself when I was facing this position, I sacrificed the knight on move 9. I then sacrificed the exchange on move 18. We now on move 24. I may as well just crown the game by playing pawn to e2 check.
Pawn to e2 check, and of course, the reason why this looks a bit risky is because white can now capture that bishop that was giving check. So your idea, Lyndon, of course, is?
Pawn to d2, Calvin, and the pawns stand the brothers in arms, and one of them will queen and be promoted to a queen, with a rook being captured in the process as well. And this was the game against Mr. Pitt Kruin, 1996.
Great stuff. Wow, that's how you use your pawns, guys, in a game. Sacrifices galore. And yeah, well done, Lyndon. Great game, brilliant game. We've got a couple of comments here in the chat box. Let's see. King also says, wicked stuff. How deep was your analysis for the knight sack? Or as they always an instinctive feel and confidence? So maybe a question, how much of it was calculation and how much of it was instinct and confidence with the initial knight sack?
Calvin, the initial knight sack was, in my opinion, the one I analyzed that I received 3 pawns, 2 protected pass pawns, and a good knight outpost on e4. So for me, that was enough to keep me going for the moment. I didn't analyze deeper than that. I felt that that was enough for me to play with. 2 pass pawns and a knight in the center was enough for me. I would play after that with the necessary confidence.
Aha. Okay, so yeah, one cannot calculate up till the end with all of these things, but certain factors do lead you to continue with that. But calculation is important, of course. So yeah, and Kim was also mentioning move order also. This game also illustrates the huge influence of move order. Move order is always important in chess, yes. So yeah, brilliant game over there, guys. What is material? We can always do some exchanges and play for. In this game, seems like the central pawns just took over everything, took the spotlight. So great game, well done, Lyndon. So yeah, I think we can, I guess, move on to our final example of the evening. Which game was this?
Calvin, we're going to go over to the Bouah game. This is Bouah versus Bouah. I was white in this position. Okay. The game dates back to July 2000 at the SA Open. And we're going to go to position number 14. Position number 14. Move 14.
So after knight b3.
Yeah.
Okay, so white has just played knight to b3.
Knight b3. That way. Right. So thanks, guys. This is our last example for the evening. I was playing white. It's the SA Open. We're playing in Alberton, Johannesburg. My opponent is Shabir Bouah, a strong player from he's won the SA Closed as well. And in this case, Shabir, tricky chap, he decides to play King h8 now. And I didn't understand this move, Calvin. He plays King h8, and all I could think about was he's probably wanting to play Knight g8, and then Bishop h6, something like that to exchange. So I didn't think much about the move King h8. I decided, school, he can play that move. I'm now going to castle queenside, because of course I'm going to storm there on that side. I've got no issues and all that. My king can go to b1 after this and everything else. Calvin, I was shocked with the next move by my opponent. My opponent now, without any hesitation, plays a move that shatters my confidence, and he plays rook f2.
Wow, okay. So now it makes sense. He was timing that he was waiting for king to go to c1. This bishop h6 idea. Ooh, yeah. Interesting idea.
Calvin, I didn't see this idea with the rook at all. He completely got me with that King h8 move, and it just goes to show that you got to analyze what things mean, and for me, King h8, I just thought normal move, etc. And now I realize if I play Bishop e2, which is a normal move, he just plays rook takes g2. And all of a sudden, his rook is on the 7th, h2 is falling, knight takes e3 is probably coming in as well. I'm probably lost here against a player against the caliber of Bouah. You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, you don't want that. So
so I was really shocked.
time to be
Yeah, I was
creative
really
again.
shocked here, and time to be creative again. And you know, I thought for a while, and then inspiration got me, and I decided to play something after about 15 minutes of thought. I decided to play bishop takes rook on f2.
Okay, so first of all, you're accepting
Well,
or going into what your opponent is asking you to do. And of course, Shabir's idea is to go bishop to h6, punning the queen to the king. Thank you to Louis Happy Face for following. Welcome to the show. So yeah, we're looking at the last example of the evening, but welcome, and looking at Dr. Bouah, Lyndon Bouah versus Shabir Bahawaddin. Bishop h6 is on the board, punning the queen, Lyndon. So this is what you're going into Shabir's plan over here, but you already scored a rook. What next?
I have to take the bishop because that bishop is the strong piece. So queen takes bishop on h6 immediately.
Queen takes bishop.
He has to capture back, of course. So knight takes, and right. So now this was my analysis in my 15 minutes of thinking. At the moment, he doesn't have any piece beyond the 3rd rank, and most of his pieces are on the 2nd rank.
Yeah.
So, and the 1st rank. So for me, I'm going to take away the g4 square so that he can't use the g4 square. So I played pawn to h3.
Okay, you played pawn to h3, so it makes sense what you're saying. But just to take stock of what's happened, you gained a rook and a bishop, and you lost your queen. So you've got a rook and bishop for queen, which is kind of like an exchange sacrifice as well. Because the rook and bishop is about 8 points, and the queen is 9 to almost 10 points. So okay, interesting stuff. h3, very nice. I love these type of moves, prophylaxis, stopping the knight on h6 from getting to g4. The knight alone looks bad on h6. The knight on e7, you can't go to f5 or g6 for the moment. So both knights are unhappy. The bishop on c8 can't reach e6, f5 or g4. So d7 is probably his best bet where he's not super active. And the queen and the rook are still very much striving to get some space and freedom. So yeah, I love that move h3. And yeah, okay. So what's next?
So Calvin, what's next was black immediately played pawn to g5 because of course black wants to get the knight to g6, and white played bishop e3 to attack the immediately, knight g6 to of course give the knight some square. And then immediately, white decided to play pawn to g3.
Pawn to g3 again, keeping the knights out.
So there again, I'm playing, keeping the knight out, and it's a prophylaxis situation. So the h3 and g3 pawns are the prophylactic moves in this position, just so that we can see where we're going. After this, my opponent played knight f7.
Knight to f7, okay.
Knight f7. Right. So now, look, of course, we know black is a queen up, but now the game is starting now. Rook d to f1.
Okay.
Attacking the knight, taking the open file, and the black king has to go to g7. And now there's an interesting plan here for black, which white has got to be aware of. Black is going to play h5, h4.
h5, h4, trying to get rid of the g3 pawn, and then you can actually get the knight onto that beautiful f4 square. Okay, some positional threats here.
Exactly. So that means that white has to prevent that move, and white now played bishop to e2.
Okay, nice. And of course, the bishop on d3 wasn't looking great.
That idea.
With the pawns on the same color, so the bishop on e2 is now controlling some good squares. I could even see something like bishop g4 at some point. It's also possible. But okay, I like bishop e2. Again, for the moment, it seems like you're just slowly building up and stopping your opponent from gaining activity.
Yeah, and that's all that it is. We're slowly stopping activity. So bishop d7, black has to develop his pieces, bishop d7. So, Calvin, the natural viewers, the natural move for white now in this position, I decided should be pawn to c5. I must continue to play the normal moves, even though I'm a queen down. So I decided to play pawn to c5, continue with my queen.
Okay, we just having some lag here on Zoom, guys. I just hope we get Lyndon back. Let's give it a second or two. Lyndon, can you hear us?
I can hear you, Calvin.
All right, we lost you there for a few seconds. So you said c5 is a must for you, continuing strategically, and of course it's also impressive because your king is on c1 and you're still willing to push on the same file that he is on. So that's very important and interesting that you should still take your opponent head on. And by the way, to our new follower Louis, happy face. We are doing a lecture this evening, so no playing. And of course, if you would like to play me, I do have usually on Sundays challenge day. We haven't had in a while now because we've had tournaments and so on. But pretty soon, I would probably say start of January, first Sunday, then we will do challenge day again for the viewers. So yeah, but welcome and thanks for following. Okay, Lyndon. So pawn to c5 was played. Just taking more space, cramping black even more. And of course, even though you are queen down, if you count the amount of pieces that you have more pieces than your opponent. If you look at the two knights and the two bishops, they are just flooding the center. The bishops look like they're doing an excellent job on both wings, and the knights, I guess it makes sense c5 because the knights are also ready to pounce in at a moment's notice. So looking good. Pawn to c5 played. So what should black do? Black played queen to e7, just trying to consolidate.
Yeah, consolidate. And also now, Calvin, the rook can swing over to h8 to try to give support to that h5, h4 idea as well. Now, Calvin, I, of course, had to now think to myself, what am I going to play in this position? Because it's very important that every move counts.
Yes.
Because white is already a queen down. So tactically, strategically, I've got to make sure that every move of mine is an important one. And I decided to follow what I call the Petrosian principle. Now, in the games of Petrosian, Calvin, you will actually see that at any given stage, he tried not defended, and I decided to play king to b2, get off the back rank, and also just defend my knight on c3 and I feel a bit safer because I can still jump to a3 if I'm attacked and all of that. So king to b2, and we will see later on how important that move becomes.
Okay, a nice move, nice tidy move, just covering h8. Everything. Rook to h8 played. Right, so black has got h5 on his mind.
And now I played now knight to a5.
Okay, hitting b7.
So still keeping up the pressure, because if I win that pawn on b7, then I can also win the pawn on a6.
Aha. And then the whole queen side falls.
He's got to be careful. He's got to be careful that I don't get the whole queen side and pawn to c6, and all of a sudden I've got a pass pawn that can run. So my opponent played bishop to c8 now.
Bishop to c8, just covering b7, also sidestepping c6 Calvin, ideas.
Calvin, in this position, I again had inspiration from above. And I felt that, I'm in a creativity space here. I've already sacked my queen. Perhaps it's time that I have another good move. Calvin, perhaps we can ask the viewers for any ideas in this position.
Yeah, very interesting moment, guys. It seems like we've started applying pressure on black. Black has got his own idea of h5 and h4. And then once the knight lands on f4, he will be doing very good. Black is slightly ahead in material, but we've got some pressure on the queen side and we're controlling the f file. So there's some positional advantages over here. And white to play. So can we get any suggestions from the viewers? Viewers, just be a bit patient with us with the connectivity being a bit slow, I think, here from Joburg's side. Where I am right now, the Zoom has also been a bit laggy. But if you are still with us, it is white to play. And what should we do next? We know what black wants to do next in his next two moves. What activity can we come up with here for white? White to play. Yeah, again, there has to be some positional considerations. And the next move that Lyndon played was very creative and try to have a think, yeah, and suggest what should white do. The black queen, of course, can't make itself well known at the moment. The queen is, of course, the most powerful piece on the board, but she can't really move that much. She would love to be inside white's position, but the two bishops on e3 and e2 are really covering a lot. And of course, white is controlling the only open file, so it's difficult to get in for black and make use of this extra queen. Or supposed extra queen that black has. Berat Zaid is suggesting bishop h5. Bishop to h5. Interesting move, Berat Zaid. So you're trying to stop h5. Is that your idea? And of course, you just applying a bit more pressure on the light squares. What do we think about that move, Lyndon?
No, it's certainly a consideration, Kelvin, because of course that stops that h5, h4 idea immediately and is certainly a possibility in this position.
I like it. It's definitely
an option.
Stopping h5. Maybe white can still look forward to playing rook f2 and double up. Of course, we need to watch out for the h3 pawn that's hanging. But very cool idea by Berat Zaid. Not played in the game, but cool. I was even this move that you played is making me think of bishop to g4. Even bishop g4 could also be a possibility, I guess. Trying to get rid of the bishop on c8, that's protecting the b7 pawn. So that also looks interesting. The double pawns don't really look that bad here, but maybe after bishop takes g4, h takes g4, black could have this knight h6 and the g4 pawn could be an issue. So perhaps in the long run, it might not be that great.
Yeah.
But okay, thanks for that suggestion, Berat Zaid. If you
Kelvin,
yeah, no, continue.
In this position, after some thought, I decided to play a rook to f5.
Whoa, rook is on a protected square here, one of black's safe squares. Bishop on c8 is hitting the rook on f5. But you played anyway. So what's the idea over here? Let's see. Okay, you hitting the g5 pawn, but still, it's still protected well enough. So what's your idea, Lyndon? Why rook f5? Let's assume black doesn't take yet.
So my idea in this position is simply to double on the f file. You wanted me to double on f2, but I decided I'm going to double from f5 and f1, because if my opponent decides to capture on f5, then the e4 square becomes available.
Looks like a very nice square for the knight on e4, yes.
After knight f8, which is forced in reality, then knight e4 could come and could close up in this position.
And f6, of course, a huge threat.
All of a sudden, pawn to f6 is threatened.
Yeah.
And don't forget the b7 is still hanging, eh?
b7 is still hanging.
Well. So
lots of threats.
That's my idea.
Lots of threats.
It's as simple as that.
And of course, your knight on e4, your bishop on e3, your bishop on e2, everybody is well centralized and they are applying pressure on both sides, actually, all over. So, yeah, that is quite nice. Okay, getting the maximum from your pieces. So that would be a very beautiful idea that essentially you would have two bishops for a queen in this position, but your pawns are controlling and you've got more space and your opponent's pieces are so restricted that positionally you have, seems like you enough compensation here. So beautiful. This is a very beautiful position, guys.
Well,
Right. So, but black didn't
so
capture on
that's the
f5.
idea there, Calvin. So black decided not to capture, and black decided to play pawn to h6.
Okay, just covering g5.
Now, in for a penny, in for a pound. And I decided, you know what? I can't back down now and move my rook away from that square because I'm committed. So I decided to play rook h to f1.
Okay, continuing with the doubling up and threatening rook takes knight on f7.
I'm attacking.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm attacking now. So my opponent decided to play knight d8.
Knight to d8, okay.
So now remember, the rook on f5 is now lying there for 2 moves already. And in this position, I decided to play bishop h5 finally.
Okay, there Berezaid's move
My
comes
idea
in.
being that if he plays rook f8, so if he plays rook f8, then I play bishop takes g6. And then, of course, the bishop will just recapture on f5 if he should recapture on that square. And then I've won my third piece.
Yeah, so that's a nice little tactical trick there.
So then I would be 3 pieces.
Yeah.
Yes. So my opponent decided not to play a rook f8, but to play bishop takes a rook.
Finally accepting.
And I played pawn takes. Finally accepting. And now, of course, pawn to f6 is a big threat, eh?
Ah, okay.
Pawn to f6 check.
That's nasty.
So he has to play knight f4 to stop that. And I, of course, capture with a g pawn. He captures with his g pawn. And I play bishop f2. He can't play queen g5 now because rook g1 pins the queen.
Okay, and then by the way, now you've gained some material back, so it seems like you have 3 minor pieces for a queen. And that's actually not bad at all. That's actually good. So, but black did get something back. Black did get something back. He's got these pawns. He's probably going to bank on the e5 and f4 pawns to just cause some confusion. But it doesn't seem like he's going to do anything once your knight reaches e4, by the way. But yeah, it seems like you're quite happy now. Bishop to f2 on the board. So black played the rook to f8. Seeing that queen g5 is not possible.
Yep. And I decided to go bishop g6.
Bishop to g6. Okay. Just covering f5.
Yeah. Just covering f5 and also taking control of the square on h7. Because, of course, Calvin, if pawn to e4, then bishop d4 check.
Oof. Okay. And then king g8. And maybe rook g1 or something.
Rook takes f4.
Oh, rook f4. Yeah, way better.
Yeah,
rook f4.
Yeah. So lots of ideas here immediately in this position that you have to be careful of. So my opponent now went queen d7 in this position. Instead of pawn to e4, he played queen d7.
Queen d7. No, he first played king h8, I think.
Yeah, king h8, king h8.
King h8, knight to c4.
Knight c4.
Getting your knight back into the game.
Knight queen d7.
Yeah.
And now I was noticing that he's threatening rook takes f5 in some lines just to get his pawns rolling.
Yeah. Yes.
But I decided to play bishop h4.
Keeping an eye on the knight.
He can't do that because then the knight would be under attack.
Yes.
Yeah. He now played pawn to b5. And I in passant. Pawn takes pawn. And now he went pawn to c6. He wants to open up the game now for his queen.
Yes.
So I decided to play rook d1. Rook d1.
Okay.
Pawn takes pawn. And a rook d1. And we'll pause after queen c6.
Okay.
So Calvin, this is an interesting position, and I want you to analyze this, but at the same time, think about the move king to b2 that white played on move 24.
Okay, so let's see. So black is threatening the knight on c4, and immediately you could notice that if the knight would move, the knight on c3 would be under fire as well. So it seems like that prophylactic move earlier on, king b2, protecting the c3 knight, allows our knight on c4 to move, which is very important here. Because otherwise, yeah, what can we do? Let's see. Rook takes d6 is not possible because this queen takes knight. So okay. Of course, we can move the knight. So I suppose knight takes pawn is possible now, just because the knight on c3 is protected.
Yeah.
So
that's right. That is the whole idea about prophylactic moves as well, Calvin and viewers, is that you must allow yourself that opportunity, because now the knight on c3 is doing marvelous work by protecting d5.
Yes.
And by playing knight takes d6, white is threatening bishop takes knight on d8.
Takes, and knight f7, pick up that rook.
Yeah.
Okay, the minor pieces are flooding the board, guys. White's got all of his minor pieces still left. Both knights, both bishops. Okay, so knight takes d6 on the board. What should white do? What should black do? Black played pawn to f3, hoping for a miracle. Pawn is 2 squares away from queening. And
so I just decided to play it easier, Calvin. Bishop f2.
Bishop f2, just blocking. Okay. Black went knight to b7.
And
what else?
And also the pawn on b6 is being defended. The advanced pass pawn is defended as well.
Might still be very important. So knight b7 on the board. Black might as well swap off that bad knight.
I decided to play knight f7 check in this position.
Okay.
And now king g8. And I played knight takes e5.
Hitting the queen.
Hitting the queen. Queen has got no good squares, so the queen goes to c8. And Calvin, white now played rook b7 with an interesting idea: bishop h5 check,
bishop
king h8, knight g6 mate.
Bishop h7, king h8, and whoo, and that's mate. That's a beautiful mate with the 3 pieces. Yeah. Thank you to CDMCNU for following. Welcome to the show. Yeah, that's a monstrous mate over there, Lyndon, with the 3 pieces. So what else?
If black decided to play a rook d8, then we will have the following maneuver. If rook d8, then bishop h7 check.
King f8.
King knight g6.
King has to go to e8.
King e8. Rook e7.
And rook e7 mate. Another beautiful mate. So
mate on that side.
So looking at this game, I guess the question is, who needs a queen?
So after rook d7, my opponent now played queen takes d7. He's had enough now of this queen of his.
Okay, yeah.
And knight takes d7, and of course after this rook d8, knight e4, just to the knight takes away the square of d6 of the knight, and it can't be captured on d7. So knight d6. Knight to d6. Just to finish it, knight takes knight. Knight takes knight. Rook takes, and then b7. So that's the game.
Oof,
Calvin,
okay.
so that was one of my best games. I don't know how you call it, but it's an interesting queen sack followed by the rook sack on f5.
Beautiful stuff there, Lyndon. Of course, again, some positional, how shall I say, positional trails there throughout the game. One just thinks about tactics when you think sacrifices, but the positional side definitely motivates you into these things. But of course, I think there should be a thanks given to Dr. Shabir Bouah for starting this brilliant sequence of events, because I mean, without the king h8 and the rook f2, then you couldn't have gotten into this beautiful idea of yours. So that's also the other nice thing. If your opponent is in a fighting spirit, then there's just more beautiful stuff that can happen. So yeah, and again, guys, you need to be fearless in order to produce such gems. And yeah, like I said at the beginning of the show, what did I say about fearlessness favors the brave? I think so, or fortune favors the brave. So yeah, I think that was a brilliant game, Lyndon. Like I said, you don't always need to have the queen. You need to think outside the box. And I must say, I really like the way you used prophylaxis. After one sacrifices something, you would think you must go all out immediately. But after giving up the queen, you started playing these quiet moves: h3, late on g3, just keeping the pieces out and waiting for the opportunity when it was right. So brilliant game.
No, thanks, Calvin. I think this is the type of game that anybody can be proud of, and I think you just got to play hard. And I mean, this was SA Open 2000 and won by Simatoe, by the way. Amon Simatoe, he scored 10.5 out of 11. I lost to him in round 5, but I was playing some great chess. The round after this, I drew with Kenny Solomon. I beat Ewan Cromot and so forth. So I was playing really good chess. I was enjoying my games as well. And I think when you're feeling confident, and confidence is one aspect of sacrificing.
Yeah.
You mustn't be scared. You must play, and you must play hard as well. And this is what I enjoyed in this position. There wasn't any immediate mates and all that, but to keep the building up, the accumulation of the threats, that is the one that forced concessions in the position of black on a continuous basis. And I mean, this is tournament chess. People will probably find some analysis there that refutes rook f5 and all that, but that's fine. You still have to refute it at the board. Yes. That is what competitive chess is about. So, yes. Calvin, that's my story tonight.
And a beautiful story it is. Thanks, Lyndon, for sharing these games with us. It's been wonderful looking at this exciting topic, sacrifices. In the previous lecture, we saw the King March. This evening, we have sacrifices. And I hope the viewers have taken something with them this evening. King also says, wow, thanks, Lyndon, fearlessness and thoroughness and belief. So thanks, King, also for the comment. And welcome to the new followers, of course, and just spread the word, guys. These are our lectures. We will most probably have one more lecture for our year of 2020. I can tentatively say that it will be on the 30th, one day before the second last day of the year. We will probably have another lecture, another London lecture. So stay tuned on various platforms, on Facebook and so on. You guys should, if you haven't joined yet, you should join the SA Chess Players group on Facebook. There is where I post all of my stuff, so you can check it out over there for notifications and so on. If you haven't pressed the follow button yet, do so. That will keep you up to date. It will tell you when we go live. And there's so much happening on the channel, guys. It's not just lectures. We have tournaments. We have, like I told our other new follower earlier on, we have challenge days. We have opening nights. So we do really much everything on the channel. If you are a chess lover, you should definitely press the follow button. So yeah, once again, thanks, Lyndon, for a wonderful evening. Thanks for providing us with so much content and such instructive examples. So yeah, thank you for the show, Lyndon.
Thanks, Calvin, and thanks, viewers, for participating, and look forward to seeing you guys on the 30th. Thanks, everybody.
Great stuff. And by the way, our Western Province President, Western Province Chess President, Burton van Staden, also gives a comment here. Very nice. Well done, Lyndon and Calvin. Thanks, Burton. So, yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And we'll see you for another Lyndon lecture on the 30th. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy.